Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Welcome back to another 1/400 scale die-cast model aircraft review of this, in this October 2023 release from Gemini Jets, the Boeing VC-25. The Boeing VC-25, colloquially known as Air Force One, is probably one of the most famous 747s ever, if not outright one of the most famous aircraft ever. This airplane, which has been in service since 1990 for the United States Air Force, is the primary means of intercontinental transportation for the President of the United States and has been so since 1990. Throughout the 90s, 2000s, and now well into the 2020s, this airplane has been synonymous with America around the world. Wherever this airplane goes, so goes the President of the United States. And not only is the President of the United States an incredibly important person, but there is an awful lot of reputation that precedes somebody like the President of the United States, and it's all embodied in the imagery of this airplane. This blue, white, gold and lighter blue livery is absolutely iconic around the world. Everybody knows what this airplane is. Even if for some reason you cannot read or you cannot read the English language, you probably recognize that flag and that livery. You know that something important is about to happen when one of these VC-25s touches down at an airfield near you. Let's take a look at this brand new release from Gemini Jets in 1/400 scale at one of the most famous 747s and arguably probably one of the most famous airplanes ever built, the VC-25. Before we take a closer look at this wonderful 1/400 scale die-cast model, let's take a look at the box from whence it comes. Coming in to here from screen right, there we are, the Gemini Jets box for the airplane colloquially known as Air Force One. Typical Gemini Jets box, 25th anniversary edition here, 1998 to 2023. They're listed, made for collectors, by collectors, a trademark as always in the upper right of the front panel of a Gemini Jets box. Front and center though, the focal point is the aircraft itself, and more or less, it is of a very similar size to the actual model. Can't entirely tell you how close it is, but I would say it's slightly smaller if there is a difference at all. Boeing VC-25 in the center bottom right. And then we get the presidential seal and United States of America in the proper bottom right corner. 1/400 scale die-cast model aircraft along the border. And of course we do have the stereotypical look inside tab on a Gemini Jets box. Taking a look at the top panel of the box, there we are, adult collectible model. Warning, contains small parts, unsuitable for children under 14 years of age. Item number is GJAF0, or O, yeah, it's an O, 2173. So, once again, for those of you keeping score at home, item number GJAFO 2173. Gemini Jets logo on the left-hand side there, and then that's about it. The back of the box, rendering of the aircraft in a steep climb, Gemini Jets logo, as real as it gets, trademark, and then, of course, all of your information about Gemini Jets, their selling points, collectibles, superior quality, realistic metal landing gear, detailed printed graphics, as real as it gets, trademark features, and of course all of your trade and dress stuff from Boeing, produced under license from the Boeing Management Company. VC-25 and Boeing are among the trademarks owned by Boeing. Officially licensed product there, the monogram, and then of course all of your web information for the Gemini Jets corporate website, as well as their social media handles and things of that nature. Made in China with the recyclable thing. Copyright 2023 Gemini Jets, Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. There is your confirmation. Bottom panel of the box, basically the same as we saw on the top. Here is your right side panel, Gemini Jets logo, tells you the item number once again, and then a smaller rendering of the aircraft, Boeing VC-25, and then the left-hand panel, effectively identical as well. Returning to the front panel of the box, the Look Inside tab, what happens if we go inside? Well, there's the void and the tray where the airplane normally would live. However, as is customary with Gemini Jets, we also have this very nice write-up about the aircraft and some macrocosmic specifications about it. Boeing VC-25, trademark. By 1985, the pair of Boeing 707-based VC-137s, used as the presidential aircraft, had been in service for 23 and 13 years, respectively, and the United States Air Force began searching for an eventual replacement. The request for proposal issued stated that the aircraft to be selected should have at least 3 engines and an unrefueled range of at least 6,000 miles or 9,700 kilometers. Both Boeing, with its 747, and McDonnell Douglas with the DC-10 were in competition to be selected, with the Boeing entry eventually selected. The fabrication of the current 747s began during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and that was 1981 through 1989. Reagan ordered 2 identical Boeing 747-200Bs to replace the Boeing 707s that he used for transport. These aircraft would be identified as VC-25s. The Boeing VC-25 is the designation of a United States Air Force passenger transportation aircraft, a military version of the Boeing 747 airliner. The VC-25 is unique in that it utilizes the basic airframe of the 747-200, but incorporates many features of the 747-400. Remember here the presidency of Ronald Reagan to 1989. Guess when the 747-400 made its debut? Yes, you see the correlation there. The VC-25 is most famous for its role as Air Force One, the call sign of any U.S. Air Force aircraft carrying the President of the United States. The 2 aircraft currently in U.S. service are highly modified versions of Boeing 747-200B with tail numbers 28,000 and 29,000. Although the Air Force One designation technically applies to the aircraft only while the President is aboard, the term is commonly applied to the VC-25s more generally. They often operate in conjunction with Marine One helicopters that ferry the President to airports in circumstances where a vehicle motorcade would be inappropriate. A ground vehicle motorcade in this particular circumstance might be more appropriate to say. However, specifications here according to the Look Inside tab on the VC-25, what do we have? Delivery, United States Air Force, well, pretty self-explanatory there. But a very iconic livery as well, designed all the way back in the 60s for the 707s. The aircraft type, it is the VC-25A. It's a 747-200B with a lot of modifications. The serial number for this particular one, tail number 28,000, is 23824. Line number was 679. Registration is technically 82-8000. The engines are 4 General Electric CF6-80 C2B1s. First flight of this particular airframe was on May 16, 1987, delivered to the United States Air Force for presidential use on 23 August 1990. Maximum takeoff weight is 833,000 pounds with a cruising speed of 580 miles per hour and an overall range of 7,800 miles. Should be noted here that one of the many divergent features that this aircraft has versus other 747-200s or 400s is that this aircraft and its stablemate 29,000 both have the capacity for in-flight refueling. So technically speaking, its range is unlimited, of course being limited by crew endurance, food reserves, and of course the engines eventually packing up and calling it quits. However, schematic view here from the port side as well as from above, we have a length of 231 feet 10 inches. We have a height from the bottom of the main gear to the top of the vertical stabilizer of 63 feet 5 inches, and we have an overall wingspan of 196 feet 8 inches. So that's the Look Inside tab, that's the box, and that is what you can see in the box, apart from, obviously, seeing this wonderful model itself. Some more detailed technical specifications on the VC-25 from Boeing themselves. Again, these specs are for the Boeing 747-200, current presidential airplane, as Boeing say officially. The aircraft has a crew complement of 26 officially. Now, generally speaking, today with airliners you see a 2-pilot cockpit in many cases, but the Dash 200 747 is a relic from an earlier time, so you would see at very least a 3, if not a 4-man cockpit. Of course, then you would have relief crews, but because this is, technically speaking, an airliner, but also very much not an airliner, you're going to have a cabin crew as well. So 26 crew members with a maximum capacity of 102, including the crew. Again, it's an airliner, but it's also a military aircraft. It's also a VIP limousine. It's also a hardened defensive target in some cases. I'm sure we'll get into some of that. So 102 people designed into the requirements for the airplanes that currently serve as Air Force One. It is, of course, the 747-200B in its specific specification in terms of model number. The engines are the General Electric CF6-80C2B1s. Each engine is producing 56,700 pounds of thrust at sea level. That's 252 kilonewtons. The long-range mission takeoff gross weight is 833,000 pounds, so that's assuming pretty much full tanks for maximum range. Maximum zero fuel weight, so in other words, what is our maximum takeoff weight before accounting for fuel? 526,500 pounds, or 238,800 kilograms. The designed mission zero fuel weight, so what is the minimum empty weight of the airplane? 46,000 pounds, or 20,865 kilometers. Maximum landing weight, 630,000 pounds, or 285,763 kilograms. Fuel capacity is 53,611 US gallons, that's 203,129 liters. Range is 7,800 statute miles, but of course that can be a floating figure because we can do aerial refueling. Wingspan 195 feet 8 inches or 59.64 meters. Length 231 feet 10 inches or 70.66 meters. 63 feet 5 inches is the height from the bottom of the main gear to the top of the vertical stabilizer. That's 19.33 meters. And the service ceiling, quoted here as 45,100 feet or 13,747 meters. So some more detailed specifications available on this airplane from Boeing themselves. However, we can only get so detailed. Because this is such an important airplane, because it does such an important job in transporting one of the most important people on the planet, there are certain aspects of its design and specification and configuration that we cannot exactly get into because it's classified information, of course. Some of these things we can very easily surmise about it. First of all, we know that it can do aerial refueling. Number one, it's been admitted many times by the Air Force, but also that little bump in the nose, that is the refueling port that will be opened up for aerial refueling. Officially, that capability has never been used. However, I must assume that they have at least practiced aerial refueling with both of the VC-25 so that the crews know how to do it, and obviously if it's ever necessary they'll be able to perform that operation. Also, you can see along the top of the fuselage we have an absolute forest of dorsal antennas. Obviously, the President of the United States is a very busy person, and often he's going to have to be in pretty much constant communication with all manner of people on the ground, in the air, maybe even in space. We have a Space Force now, so who knows? Facilitating all of that is that forest of antennas. I am counting how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 antennas across the top of the fuselage. And I'm sure that there are some other antennas that have not been modeled here in wonderful detail by Gemini Jets. However, yes. So we can surmise a couple of things. Aerial refueling, and we can surmise that this thing has got quite the suite of electronics on board, both for communications as well as some other things. The realm of speculation now. Informed speculation, but speculation nonetheless. We know that this airplane has some capacity to change its attitude on the ground. I remember in the last few weeks, as of the time of recording this, there has been some chatter in the media about Air Force One and the accessibility of various entrances and exits, particularly that L1 door that you so often see the president climbing up the stairs to enter the aircraft. There is some concern that it may not be the most accessible thing in the world, and there have been a few accommodations brought in terms of making it easier to get on and off of the airplane. One is a cargo door that you can see there on the starboard side forward, which is generally a cargo door that you'll see on other versions of the 747, used for loading cargo into the lower cargo deck, although it probably has some slightly different purposes on Air Force One as well. There's a similar door on the port side of the aircraft in basically the same position, forward to aft. However, some media outlets reported that Air Force One, like freight configurations of the 747, particularly the 400F, and this airplane does have some -400 DNA in it as well, Air Force One may have the capability of retracting its nose gear strut while it's on the ground so that the airplane can sort of kneel down and reduce the gap between the ground and the bottom of the fuselage and just make it a little bit easier to climb into the airplane. I've never seen it actually done, but it is speculated, and I've got it on some decent sources, that that actually may be possible to do with at least one, if not both, of the VC-25. So keep watching this airplane whenever you see it in the public eye. You may just see a previously unknown capability of Air Force One come to light. A few other areas that people very popularly speculate about with regard to these airplanes. Number one, is there an escape pod? We don't know if there is an escape pod. The very famous movie Air Force One, of course, popularized the idea that Air Force One has an Apollo spacecraft-style escape pod that can be fired out the belly of the airplane should all hell break loose. The government will not confirm nor deny the existence of any presidential evacuation device. Is it there? The official story is maybe. We just don't know. And that's about all I'll speculate with regard to that. Something else, though, that the airplane almost certainly has, and we also know this from looking at the E-4B. I've also posted a review of one of those models before on the channel. The E-4B, also based on the 747-200, that airplane is specifically hardened in terms of electromagnetic pulses, particularly those that would be generated from nuclear detonations. The entire fuselage of the E-4 is impregnated with what's called a Faraday cage, basically a wire mesh network that goes throughout most of the fuselage, and it insulates the airplane electromagnetically. This will keep the electronics on board from being fried from a large electromagnetic pulse from either a nuclear attack, a directed electromagnetic attack, or even from things like solar flares, believe it or not. So I am absolutely certain that the VC-25s also have a similar system. I am also absolutely certain, therefore, that the cockpits on the VC-25s might not be the most modern-looking things in the world, because the more electronics you have, the more susceptible they are to electromagnetic interference, meaning that some old-school steam gauges may still be in the cockpits of the VC-25 simply because it's more reliable. Beyond that, the airplane almost certainly has, at very least, passive countermeasures from being attacked. Both physical attacks from missiles and perhaps air-to-air gunfire, but also electronic attacks. So in addition to having the hardening from electromagnetic interference, I'm sure that there are also all sorts of electronic systems on board that are designed to jam enemy radar, confuse missiles, both radar-guided as well as heat-seeking missiles. You better believe that there are some more active countermeasures as well in terms of flares and chaff launchers. Again, as you saw in the movie Air Force One, they drop flares and then do a diving break off to the left. You better believe that this airplane has the capability to do something like that. Again, the government will never officially say yes or no, but it is a safe assumption that the airplane that's carrying one of the most important people on the planet, and certainly the most important person in the United States, has some capability to defend itself more than just being able to run away. On the note of being able to run away, are there any other modifications to Air Force One or the VC-25 that will enable it to attain any higher speeds? Maybe, probably not. Are there any other modifications that enable this airplane to carry any offensive weaponry, such as perhaps missiles? Maybe, maybe not. Again, these are all realms of wild speculation. But I am assured that the, at very least, accommodations for such systems do exist on board this airplane. Do they exist? And if they do, are they ever used? Have they ever been used? We don't know. We probably never will. However, we can certainly rest assured that this airplane is the guardian of a great many very interesting secrets. What of this model itself, though? Those of you who have seen my other model aircraft reviews may be having a little bit of an identity crisis right now, because this is not the first time that I have featured an airplane that would be known as Air Force One on the channel. However, it is the first time that we're talking about the VC-25. It's not the first time that we're talking about a 747 being called Air Force One, though. Back in May of 2020, the very first model aircraft review that I ever posted actually was of the proposed VC-25B, which is based on the 747-8I. That is still in the works for succeeding the VC-25s. They, as of 2023, have not yet entered service, and in fact, they're not even finished yet. Those airframes have been built, but they are now in the custody of the U.S. Air Force, and they are being converted for their specific missions and are being converted into VC-25B specification. But they are based on the 747-8I. Initially, they were built as airliners. However, the company that they were built for never took possession of them, so they are effectively brand new. Blank sheet of canvas for the Air Force to do what they see fit. However, the current state of affairs is this particular aircraft and its stablemate. This is tail number 28,000. 29,000 is the other one, and they trade duties in terms of ferrying the president around. Gemini Jets, it's not the first time that they have made a model of a VC-25. However, this is 28,000. The other airplane that they had produced in the past, I believe that was a 2016 release, was 29,000. So finally, in 2023, we have 28,000 also in 1/400 scale die-cast metal, and it looks absolutely fine. This is one of those airplanes that I think everybody needs to have. If you are a model aircraft collector, and if you are in any way happy with Boeing, if you like Boeing airplanes, particularly if you like the 747, if one of these becomes available, I think it's one that you absolutely would be well served to have, because first of all, it's a 747-200. There aren't all that many of those left in the world. Beyond that, it's one of the most special Dash 200s ever built, and probably it is the most famous 747 ever, because one look at that livery, and immediately you know exactly what this airplane is, where it comes from, and who is on board. So it certainly has a legendary presence, and that livery is not something unique to the 747 version of Air Force One. This goes back all the way to the 1960s when they first started flying the 707s, and there are even a couple of other smaller airplanes that carry either the vice president or sometimes the president himself on other occasions when they don't need the full services of the 747. They also fly in this livery. So definitely it's a distinctive one, it's an important one, and Gemini Jets here in 2023 doing a very nice job rendering it and bringing it to us. Delivery is very nicely done, everything is very crisp. The main color painting is very nice. The stencil work around the nose section and the hump of the fuselage looks very nice, integrating the blue with the white. The lettering United States of America looks absolutely resplendent, as do all of the smaller tampo printing details in terms of the windows, hatches, pitot tubes and static ports. The antennas that are separately applied 3D elements look great. Cockpit windows look great. The emergency escape hatches above the cockpit look great. And of course, other details like cargo doors and the presidential seal also very nicely rendered and even legible, as we'll see later on. Tail section here, you can see separately applied exhaust outlet for the auxiliary power unit. That all looks good. And the wonderful American flag on the vertical stabilizer with the tail number 28,000. There actually are 50 stars and 13 stripes on that American flag, so they have definitely scored some points with authenticity. It looks absolutely wonderful. And there are a few other details that we will see in due course on the wings as well. So lots of great detail here all around on the VC-25 in 1/400 scale. Also the landing gear. We've got rolling gear. They are plastic wheels with rubber tires surrounding them, and the main gear they actually pivot fore to aft as well as roll. They support the weight of the aircraft very nicely, and it does sit straight and level on the ground both in pitch and in roll. So the airplane looks the part on the ground as well. So really a lot of great things to see on this particular Gemini Jets rendition of the VC-25. Taking a look here at the starboard side of VC-25, what do we see? Well, first of all, we see a wonderful proportion of what is macrocosmically a 747-200. Nothing really out of the ordinary there, but start to look a little bit more closely, and if you can look past the livery obviously being very distinctive, you start to realize that you're looking at something that's not quite all that meets the eye. Well, the distinctions between this and the run-of-the-mill 747 begin right at the nose section. You can see you've got the nose of the 747 right down to the stereotypical hump in the upper fuselage where the upper deck is. However, the immediate forward section of the nose, what do you see? You see a little bit of an interruption in the generally gradually sloping profile of the 747 nose. You see this little blister right here. What is that? That is the fairing that covers the receptacle that would be used for air-to-air refueling. Literally, you will have two airplanes that are making physical contact with each other, flying in formation at whatever altitude the refueling is occurring. It's a very delicate operation, and it's something that, as far as we know, has never been done with Air Force One, either flying as Air Force One or with any of these airplanes, even in training, but I would assume that it's been practiced. Regardless, that's how it would work, and the refueling boom would come down from the tanker airplane, probably a KC-135 or a KC-10. Those seem to be the two most popular tankers used by the U.S. Air Force these days, and they would mate up and fuel would be transferred from one airplane to the other, with them braking and then closing up the fairing once everything is done, or so the movie Air Force One would suggest. However, everything else that we see in this forward section of the airplane looks pretty par for the course as far as the 747-200 is concerned. The overall proportion of the hump in the upper fuselage enclosing the upper deck, all of that appears to be pretty much the same as you would see on a civilian variant -200 747. On the upper deck of this aircraft, though, we are led to believe that a state-of-the-art electronics and communications suite is housed. Of course, the exact nature of the equipment therein is highly classified, and we will likely never know what that actually entails, but it's there, and it's inside the upper deck of Air Force One, as it was. Anyway, continuing to move aft, you can see some of the antennas that we've got across the dorsal area of the fuselage. We can see 3 vertical antennas, and then we have got a couple of dish antennas. We've got 2 of those visible just fore and aft of amidships, but you've got just a forest of antennas across the top side of this airplane. And it's little wonder why the president and his staff need to be in pretty much constant contact with a whole bunch of people. So that's the communications capability. Moving back forward, though, just forward of the wing struts, you can see that we have got this cargo door. This is something that you'll also see on civil variants of the 747-200, so really nothing to write home about there. However, what is very distinctive about this particular cargo door is immediately forward of it, you have got the presidential seal. Yes, it's there, and yes, it's legible, and it's really, really cool to see. You're left in no doubt as to who this aircraft is going to be transporting. Continuing to move aft, you can see we have got the wing spar, where the wings are mounted. This is a cradle arrangement, just like other Gemini Jets molds of the 747-200. The wings are basically one piece that is then mounted into the fuselage as one piece. The fuselage comes over top of the wing piece, 2 principal sections of the airplane, then the main wings and then the fuselage, and they mate together one on top of the other. The same holds true here with this release. -400 747s from Gemini Jets, and then the -8 747s have a different arrangement, but here still an old school cradle arrangement, and it works quite nicely. Also, what works quite nicely is the livery on this airplane. Obviously, we have got the white and the blue with the United States of America text and the Air Force roundel moving slightly more aft. However, below that, we have got the blue and gold cheat line. There is just a very slight gold pinstripe almost that is below the blue sections of fuselage there, and that encompasses most of the windows. And then below that you have got gold, and then a little bit of a white cheat line as well. And above and below that, rather, you have got chrome. So we have got a chrome band that is in the forward section of the airplane, and then the entire aft section of the airplane also done in that chrome banding, which comes down through here. A neutral off-white is just in the amidships area around the wing spar. So that's really nice, and of course Gemini Jets doing a great job in replicating that. What they've also replicated very nicely is this sky blue, or almost robin's egg blue color that you see on the airplane around the engine nacelles, as well as in the lower section of the very forward section of the airplane underneath the nose. Looks very, very nice continuity of colors in this livery, very distinctive of course as well. And the engines, these GE CF6s, they are a bit different from what you'll see on modern 747s. However, they are still run-of-the-mill for the very few -200s that are still flying, and you'll also see a lot of these flying on the very many -400s that remain in service. So it is still a familiar enough proportion to see the relatively smaller nacelles on the 747 wing, although as the -8 has become more and more ubiquitous in service, we're used to seeing the larger engines and the larger nacelles these days. However, the size aside, these nacelles look very nice. You've got the anti-icing ring on the intake side of the engine, and then the core of the engine where all your combustion is happening, you can see that the exhaust cone has been chromed very nicely as well. Utterly spotless this airplane would be in reality, and this recreation of it by Gemini Jets definitely looking the part as well. Also on this side, we have got our doors. We have got one door right here. Difficult to see because they're not marked in the same ways that they would be on a civilian airliner, but we have got our L1, L2, and over the wings we have got L3, L4, and even an L5 door back here. So full complement of entry-exit doors for the 747-200, as you would expect to see otherwise. Very nicely recreated here. In the aft section of the fuselage, we've got ourselves, obviously, the Air Force roundel right there, as we perhaps lost our focus a little bit. There we go. Air Force roundel right above the L5 door. We've got our horizontal stabilizer, and we have got our vertical stabilizer with our tail number 28,000, as well as the American flag here. Looks very good. It's got 13 stripes and 50 stars. I counted all of them. Very nicely done by the Tampo Printing design team at Gemini Jets. Aft view on VC-25, what do we see? Well, not all that much to see in terms of the livery, although you can see where the Jeet lines, both the blue, gold, and white, all come together here around the tail, and you can see the chrome underbelly there. It looks very, very nice. But here we can see really the geometries of the trailing edges of the main wings as well as the empennage. Very, very nice proportions here along the main wing. You can see the rear of the engines, the exhaust sides of the engines. They look absolutely marvelous. Again, smaller than what you're accustomed to seeing on the -8 747s, but they look very, very good. No visible bypass here because the scale just prohibits that in terms of the sizes required, but looks very, very nice geometrically and proportionally. Also, you can see that we have got the trailing edge profile of the wing. Flaps retracted quite obviously. You can see the fairings surrounding the flap actuation architecture. It looks very, very good. Along the center line, there's the empennage, your horizontal and vertical stabilizers there. Horizontal stabilizers look good, as well as the 2 exhaust outlets for the auxiliary power unit. Generally, we just see one big pipe coming out of the center tail cone on one of these airplanes. However, there are distinctly 2 openings here that you can see in that APU exhaust. So that's very interesting. I don't know if that's something that you would see on other -200s or if that's something that is specific to the VC-25, but nonetheless, it's a feature there, and Gemini Jets have included it. Landing gear as well, main gears visible, the inboard and outboard bogies, everything is sitting straight and level, and it looks good from here. The main gear, they all rotate, and the bogies articulate fore to aft. So they tilt, so if you pitch the airplane up, the wheels stay on the ground, and the bogies will tilt. So, looks good. Moving to the starboard side, trailing edge of the starboard wing as well, just barely visible here, USAF, United States Air Force, on the top side of the wing, and that's something that we'll see a little bit later on in more detail. But looks really, really good here from this aft view. And now from the port side, this is probably the angle that most of us are most accustomed to seeing this airplane from, because this is generally the side of the airplane that the president will enter and exit from, and therefore it's the side of the airplane that's facing the assembled press cameras. So this is going to be much more familiar to us, but same features that we saw on the starboard side, they are still evident here on the port side. We've got the refueling hatch there, we have got the forward cabin windows, the cockpit windows, emergency escape hatch there on top of the cockpit with a little red decal on it, looks good. And of course, we have got static ports and pitot arrays right there. There's the presidential seal and this lower entrance door, which generally is used for staff entrances, but in some cases has been used for the president getting on and off the airplane. Also, we have got the main door, the L1 door, that would be used here more traditionally to get the president on and off. And of course, we have got more doors. We have got L2, L3, L4, and L5. So we've got 5 doors on starboard and port sides. Looks very, very good. Otherwise, by and large, mostly symmetrical between port and starboard. Really no features on this side that are not evident on the other, but we do have some features not evident on this side that are evident on the other, namely the cargo doors. We do have this smaller cargo hatch right here in the lower section of the airplane, but we do not have a larger cargo door here in the aft section. We've just got this one. So little differences, but by and large, it is more or less symmetrical and a mirror image. We do, though, have a great view of the port side engines, their nacelles, and their support pylons, mounting them to the wing structure. Look absolutely great. You can even see some detailing in here, just showing some mounting hardware and things like that, trying to emulate those details. Very cool. Additionally, you have got the landing light fairings right there. Looks absolutely marvelous. And again, just wonderful colors and wonderful proportions on this livery. Everything just so nicely comes together, and it really does have a very nice visual presence, I must say. There is the empennage here from the port side with the American flag in an orientation that's a little bit more habile in terms of what we're used to seeing. Again, the detailing on everything looks absolutely marvelous, absolutely great. No complaints whatsoever about this one from Gemini Jets. It looks spectacular. And here, this nose-on view of VC-25 looks pretty standard for the 747. However, that refueling receptacle here, that hatch still evident as you would expect, looks really, really good. However, pretty much everything else is run-of-the-mill 747 from this particular vantage point. Everything looks good. Of course, the livery coming together very nicely through here as well, as you would expect. Looks great. The cheat lines meeting each other perfectly. No problems with any of that. Looking out to either side of the airplane, we have got the engines. You can see the intake sides here. We have got fan blade detail very nicely molded in there. These are completely static. They don't rotate. That's something that you really don't see on 1/400 scale models anyway. However, the fan blade detail very nicely replicated, and you can definitely tell that these are turbofan engines that you're meant to be looking at. So looks good. Leading edges of the wings also look good with the slat hardware implied here with the panel gaps. Looks good. Of course, the landing light fairings also plainly evident, and everything looks good. Moving up, taking a look at the proportion of the empennage over the top of the fuselage, everything looks good. Everything looks pretty straight, no problems there. And you can just see from this angle, they look like they are little hooks coming off of the wingtips of the elevators there, but they are actually antennas that are facing forward from the horizontal stabilizer. We'll take a little bit of a better look at that in a moment when we go freehand and we are able to see the airplane from above. But yes, everything looking great here from all angles on the VC-25. No complaints from me. Going freehand now on the VC-25, get a little bit of a closer look at some details that we perhaps could not see earlier. First of all, you can see we've got wonderful colors and wonderful shapes and wonderful proportions of everything all over this model. Looks absolutely wonderful. Zooming in on the nose section, you can see that we have got the details there of the static ports and pitot tubes and things like that. Also a couple of bleed air holes around the refueling hatch. Of course, that's something that you would not see on the standard 747, but there it is. You can also see the shut line around the radome. Very cool. Fueling hatch itself, and then we go up into the cockpit windows with our de-icing misters, as well as our windscreen wipers. Looks good. There's the escape hatch across the top of the cockpit. And then moving down, we have our cabin windows. Moving down further, there is the lower entry door, and there is the presidential seal. It is actually legible. I don't know if you will be able to read it or not. However, it is legible. Do believe me. And yeah, looks absolutely great. Moving rearward, there's the wing spar. Wings joining up to the fuselage, landing light fairings, and there are our engine nacelles here on the port wing. Top side of the wing, There is the Air Force roundel, and there is one of the antennas. These are dual-purpose electrostatic discharge, as well as antennas. Another one, of course, on the starboard wing with our USAF branding on the top side of the wing. There are the starboard side engines, look good, and the shut lines for our slats and flaps on the leading and trailing edges, respectively. Over here we have got, across the top side of the fuselage, the forest of antennas for all of the very important communications equipment that this airplane has. Looks very good. Also a couple of things here modeled in tampo print that are not modeled in 3 dimensions, but namely this square area. I don't think that's a roof hatch. Not entirely sure what that is, but it's there. Interesting. Empennage. Horizontal stabilizers also have antennas on them. And then, of course, the vertical stabilizer looking pretty much as it would on the civilian variant of the airplane. So really, from where I'm standing, this looks really, really good. And now looking from the starboard side, looking down on the airplane, everything looking marvelous here as well. There is some more upper deck detail there with some windows that I imagine would be blanked over most of the time. That looks good. We don't have the lower entry door here for stairs, but we do have the cargo door there for entering the lower deck directly, alongside the presidential seal once again, with more pitot tubes and static ports along the lower area of the nose. Looking great. Wing root area, landing lights, starboard engines, looking very nice. Leading edge of the starboard wing looks great. Livery as well, all of the paint lines, they are very crisp and clear. There's no overpainting. There is no white or blue bleeding into the other paint. It's really, really good. No issues with any of that. Looks absolutely marvelous. The lettering here, United States of America, utterly crisp, clear, no problems. The aft cargo door looking good. Very, very nice. Very nice indeed. All of our doors along the right side, R1 through R5, they look wonderful. And then the empennage as well from this view. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful airplane. Beautiful rendering in 1/400 scale here by Gemini Jets. Definitely have to say, if you want this one, get this one because it looks so good. And anyone who happens to like the 747, well, this is probably the most famous 747 ever made. So if you're in the market for it, definitely get it. So there it was, rendered in resplendent 1/400th scale by Gemini Jets, the Boeing VC-25, or 747-200B if you prefer, but either way that you really choose to describe the technical specification of this airplane, there are 3 words that will describe it to anybody who knows anything about aviation: Air Force One. Yes, this airplane has become synonymous with the President of the United States and the presence of the United States around the world. In addition to being a logistical asset in terms of allowing the President to come and go across the continents as is required, it is also a tremendous political asset just in the presence that it exerts. When this airplane comes to town, people know immediately what it is, who is on board, and what it's doing there. This airplane is really a diplomatic extension of the presidency and of the executive branch in general. The President of the United States is the chief diplomat of the United States, which means that in addition to the executive role that a president holds, the president is also responsible for fostering relationships between the United States and the rest of the world. This airplane and the presence of this airplane, the big United States of America on the side, and of course the American flag on the empennage, this airplane is also a diplomat acting on behalf of the United States. Wherever it goes, so too goes the will of the American people and their chief executive and their chief representative. Therefore, in addition to being a very impressive airplane technically, and now having been in service for over 30 years, still doing its job stalwartly and without fail under all circumstances, this airplane remains one of the most iconic modern icons of the American culture, and really, it's well known around the world and continually will be for some time to come. Eventually, it will be replaced by the VC-25Bs whenever and wherever they may come from. Eventually, when their conversion processes are complete and they are ready to take up the mantle from the venerable VC-25s. However, until then, these airplanes, tail numbers 28,000 and 29,000, will continue to carry the President of the United States and, of course, the will of the American people around the United States
and around the world wherever it may be required. This model from Gemini Jets, absolutely wonderful. It took them long enough to make 28,000, but eventually they have, and it looks absolutely great. Similar tooling that you've seen on other versions of the 747-200 series from Gemini Jets. However, the fit and finish on this one is absolutely great. You've got wonderful livery details here, both in the primary paint colors as well as in the tampo printed details. Landing gear are great. The polished chrome accents in various sections of the livery are absolutely wonderful. All of the detail work in terms of emblems, flags, the presidential seal, and the text on the airplane, absolutely great. No distortion, 100% legible, even at a very small scale. So if you are in the market, as I said, for 747 memorabilia, particularly older 747s that are very famous, yeah, this is definitely one that you should definitely consider, particularly if you also have Gemini Jets models of both the E4B as well as the proposal, anyway, for the new Air Force ones, the VC-25Bs. They're not in this livery. However, I'm led to believe now that they will be painted in a livery very similar to this one when they do enter service flying with the President of the United States, whenever that will occur. However, this one absolutely has to get my highest recommendation. No points off for anything. It's absolutely wonderful, and it is a big icon, I have to say, in terms of the model aircraft hobby. This is why you get into it. For details like these, for subjects like this, it's absolutely wonderful. Could not speak any more highly of the VC-25 in 1/400 scale by Gemini Jets. Until next time, though, I do thank you all very, very much for watching. Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you. And of course, we will see you soon.